This is Stingray, host of the Stingray Show, reminding you if you like our content and you like our episodes, wherever you are listening to this from, whether it be YouTube or on Spotify, make sure you subscribe to our content for all of the latest information and latest episodes. And without further ado, here is another great episode, so enjoy and continue listening.
Drivers, start your engines!
The most famous words in NASCAR. Drivers, start your engines! Come to Talladega this weekend. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We are about to be joined by NASCAR on Fox's own Chris Myers to do a deep dive into Talladega, the racing industry, and of course, Chris Myers' career in broadcasting. So guys, let's get things rocking and rolling right here on the Stingray Show as we are primed and ready for boogity boogity boogity. Let's go racing, boys, at Talladega right now on the Stingray Show.
Hi, this is Tim Brando with a reminder. Those of you on Tide 100.9, look out. You're about to feel the buzz of Stingray.
This is Stephen Ray, a.k.a. Stingray, coming to you live from Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
I'm Heath Hopkins. I'm here in DeSoto County, Mississippi, right outside of Memphis, Tennessee.
You know, Mark, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you feel that responsibility to pay it forward and give some kid a chance coming up in the ranks, kind of like Tony did for you?
Why do you think I'm talking to Stingray tonight?
Thank you, man. I appreciate
that.
No,
I mean, look, no.
Hey, Stingray, here's the deal. When you get involved with Texas, it's like getting married to a stripper. and let me explain this. It looks good. It's kind of sexy on the surface. Yeah. But then you get the baggage, you get the drama, you get all that eventually comes with it. And that's what you get with Texas, and that's what the Big 12 learned.
And Heath, any thoughts on our show moving forward?
Hey, to everyone in Tuscaloosa listening here on Tide 100.9, with the Stingray Show, if you don't like it, you better learn to love it, because it's the best show going today, baby. Woo!
And with that, I want to welcome you inside the Wednesday evening edition of the Stingray Show. And like I said, off the top of the show, it is Talladega weekend in the state of Alabama. And that is a huge deal for NASCAR and, of course, the city of Talladega and Lincoln, Alabama. And we are about to be joined by the host of NASCAR, who goes to all of the races and covers them for Fox Sports, and he is a legend in the sports broadcasting industry. He started out at ESPN and then moved over to Fox. Please help me welcome to the Stingray Show to talk all things Dega and NASCAR, Mr. Chris Myers. Chris, how are you doing, and what are you most looking forward to this weekend at Dega?
Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for the very kind introduction. I'm looking forward to. Well, first of all, that was a fun open, Stingray. It's good to talk to you. Having my roots in radio too. I love the different personalities and the way people can express themselves on the radio, where they have more time than it seems like television. But anyway, Talladega is one of my favorite tracks. I'm not just saying that because we're going there, but on the 20 plus years of pre-race hosting and post-race with NASCAR, starting with Daytona. You know, Fox, we do the first half of the season, so we always get at least a Talladega race. And Daytona is Daytona, and super speedways and drafting and however you want to adjust to the car, the next-gen car, the Gen 7 car, where we are now. But I like Talladega because of the unpredictability. The atmosphere is one thing, and we can go into that. I've spent time in the infield, and I've called it like Mardi Gras and 200 200 miles an hour. It kind of feels like that, just the whole vibe. But this week, or this one in particular, after getting an off week and what has been kind of a strange start to the season with Toyotas, specifically the Joe Gibbs Toyotas and Denny Hamlin and Christopher Bell winning, 5 of the first 9, dominating. Our defending champ finally got a top 10 and Joey Logano, and you always have the Hendrick Chevrolets. But Talladega, we've had 9 different winners in the last 9 races at Talladega, and we've also had 6 different teams that have won, from Trackhouse to Hendrick to Childress to Penske, 2311, JTG, Doherty. And so it creates a lot of variety. And the only repeat winner we've had was, Ryan Blaney, at least in those last 11 Talladega races that we've had. And that's just not the one that we're on in the spring, the later races as well. So I like it. And the big crashes and surviving the big one are all part of it. And some drivers don't, but this is to the greatest degree is what risk reward and high speed racing is about. And people that don't want to admit says, well, it's not really racing. Well, no, it is. And there's just like there's short tracks and mile and a half or whatever it takes. But the tradition is there, the atmosphere, and I really enjoy going out there in Alabama. I always hope the weather's good for us in the spring. So sorry to ramble, but there's a lot to express there.
So, Chris, let's go ahead and start. You talked about there has been a week off, but the majority of the previous races so far this season, there have been major trouble on pit road for
Yep.
a lot of drivers. What do you attribute that to for this season? Because I don't remember a time in the past where we've had so many crucial errors on pit road.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think we've already had. I mean, when Kyle Larson's team already makes a pit crew change, or at least shakes it up, which he did a few races ago. Again, they've got people in the system with Hendrick Motorsports, those allies, so to speak. But you know that they're after something, and Ryan Blaney has had some problems with his pit crew. I would say, we've even had pit road speeding penalties. Those numbers are up depending upon the track. I'm going to attribute it to mostly because we've had really good racing. The last few have been a little lopsided in terms of, Larson dominating and Denny Hamlin before that. But most of the races have been come down to exciting finishes. I'm going to attribute it a lot to just being very aggressive, and not just the drivers, maybe the crew chiefs on some of the calls they're making. And even on some of the pit crews, trying to maximize, because these guys are highly trained. It's not like they're not giving it their best shot. They're not, just mailing it in one weekend and rising to the next. And sometimes it's where the pit stall is or the situation in the race. But I think everybody's trying to push the envelope just a little bit more, and maybe that causes some of the mistakes from the role the driver plays in pit stop penalties to that of pit crews.
So, Chris, let's get off of NASCAR briefly and talk about here recently. You released a book titled That Deserves a Wow. Tell us a little bit about that book and how that all came about, please.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I wrote it to share with people who are sports fans my experiences that are unique, which includes the Daytona 500, the broadcast when Dale Earnhardt lost his life. There were those kinds of moments. I was at the World Series with the A's and Giants and reported on that when I was at ESPN when the earthquake hit in the Bay Area. I was at the Atlanta Olympics in '96, the Summer Games, working overnight when the bomb went off and thinking there was terrorism taking place and reporting on that. So those are some of the difficult things that I've had in sport. And then there's fun moments, whether it's covering the college football and the great upset of going back at Boise State of Oklahoma, back at the Fiesta Bowl before we even had a playoff, or at the BCS back then is what they call it, covering LSU and a number of those teams, and then Super Bowls with Tom Brady and Mahomes, being on the network broadcast for Fox, and the World Series in baseball with a number of teams, the Red Sox when they broke through, the White Sox in the early 2000s. So I wanted to share those experiences that people could relate to reading about it, but there's things behind the scenes that we do as broadcasters, and there's a little bit of my life that why I react or why we react to covering the things we cover because of our own experiences. So I think I hope people will enjoy it, and there's some rough moments in there that are accurate, that are factual, that ultimately will be inspirational. And some of the great names in sports, Bill Murray, the comedian, wrote the foreword, who I've golfed with and been friends with. Charles Barkley, talk about Alabama, who's become a great friend over the years, and you think you know him, but there's stories in there about him that maybe you have not heard. And a tender and sensitive side to some of the people that we see endure in athletics.
So, Chris, hold that thought because we are up against our first break. And when we come back, we are going to continue to dive into your career and then, of course, finish up talking about Dega. That's on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Stingray Show. Chris Myers of Fox Sports covering NASCAR will continue with us right after this break. Do you currently have a bass fishing lake, but you're not happy with the size of bass that are coming out of the lake? Springtime is the perfect time to stock your lake with fish that will help you grow larger bass. Currently, right now, from Honey Hole Fisheries, they can offer threadfin shad, copper-nosed bluegill, minnows, golden shiners, and tilapia to help grow larger bass in your lake. You can contact Honey Hole Fisheries at 205-799-0192. Once again, that is 799-0192. Honey Hole Fisheries also offers Texas Hunter fish feeders. Contact him today to grow bigger bass in your dream lake. Heath, thank you for joining us.
Oh man, it was. I felt like a NASCAR driver, but yeah, I got here.
Right.
Chris, how are you today, friend?
I'm good, doing well. Thanks for asking.
You're more than welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I apologize for being late, but I'm a father of 4 and I had responsibilities and duties I just couldn't avoid.
Well, that's a priority, and that is one of the things in my book too. I talk about my father and fatherhood, and how our careers sometimes challenge us with time with our children and our families, and how we make those decisions. So I certainly understand. You do have your priorities in the right place.
I appreciate that. Stephen, did you give Chris our normal rundown?
I did. Mm-hmm.
All right. Did you tell him my Dan Mullen joke?
No, I didn't.
Well, Chris, after I give the rundown, I always say, hey, we want you to be the funniest and smartest guy in the room. And when we told Dan Mullen that, he said, well, can I be the prettiest? Or like, sure, Dan, you can be the prettiest too. So.
Well, I like a guy with a sense of humor. That's cool.
Yes. So, Heath, since you're here, do you want to bring us back in the next segment?
Have you talked anything about the book yet?
Yes, just now, but we just briefly touched on it. So if you got any questions, feel free.
Okay. Chris, we told Senator Tuberville that when he joined us, and he was like, Dan Mullen funny? That's a joke. Which we got a kick out of. So
that's good.
But yeah, Tommy never backs down from a fight. I'll leave it at that.
We need fighters.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. We absolutely do. So
Heath, do you want to bring us back?
I'd be more than happy to.
Okay.
Welcome back, SEC fans. I'm Heath Hopkins, along with Stephen Ray. You're listening to the Stingray Show here on Tide 100.9. And today's a very special show. We have Chris Myers with us from Fox Sports. Chris has come out with a book. And Chris, the very first thing I noticed about your book is right there on the top of the cover. Forward by Bill Murray. And I immediately started smiling. Are you and Bill friends? How'd that come about?
Yeah, he's an interesting guy to become friends with. It goes back to the ESPY Awards in the 90s when I was at ESPN. I was fortunate to spend 10 years at ESPN in what I call their golden years, the growth years with Chris Berman, Bob Lee, kind of the pillars of NASCAR, and did some Sports Center with Mike Tirico, Linda Cohn, still going out there, and got to meet Bill. And I come from a big family. He comes from a big family. I like comedy. He likes comedy. He likes sports. Obviously, I'm into sports. So we started talking, had a good time, and just connected, and then hung out with his brothers and went to his charity golf event and went to a baseball game and got to golf with him. And through the years, he's somebody who I've talked to. He's especially a big golf and baseball fan, loves his Cubs, but and that's his problem, as I tease him. But I leaned on him on some stuff because he's a wise person. When I had the first live OJ Simpson interview after the wrongful death lawsuit, as well as the alleged double murder trial there, he helped out on some things when I just needed some advice. Some people said it was risky to do that or didn't want me to interview a killer, whatever, but it was something we did back then, and we've stayed in touch, through the years. And he's a funny guy, but he's a very smart guy, and very. It's funny because he even says, I went from being known as a comedic actor to now in some serious roles, when he's been in some other movies later in life. But he's the kind of guy who's fun to hang out with, even if he wasn't famous.
Chris, I got a quick follow-up to that. Have you ever been to his establishment down in Key West?
I have not. I have been to Caddyshack, which they have this week up in North Florida, outside of Jacksonville. It's the Murray Brothers charity Caddyshack golf event, and I have been. I have to tell you a quick funny story. It's in the book, but I mention this because you can't make this stuff up. And I know people who watched the movie Caddyshack and the role that he had in golf. But he invited me over. First of all, I was in New York covering tennis at the time, but he said he had his house was up on the Hudson River, and he said, "Why don't you come out to the house?" I said, Bill, I don't have a car. I just have some time off, and so I'm here with ESPN cover. He said, "Well, I'll send a car for you." So he sends this long white stretch limo, right, gigantic thing that picks me up. And as I'm pulling into his driveway, he's videotaping me, and he's announcing, like, as I step out, "Hey, ESPN, this is how Chris Myers spends your money. Don't fall for it on the expense report." That type of. So I was like, "Come on, Bill, don't easy on me." So anyway, I said, "Shut that up." So he's giving me the tour of the house. He's got this pool and a basketball set up. The pool has a Cub logo in it at the bottom of it, and we're walking through the yard. You can't make this stuff up. And I'm stepping through these holes. His view of the Hudson River. It's out towards the summer, and I'm stepping in these holes. And I said, "Man, he said, "Be careful, this is dangerous." I said, "What's the problem here?" He said, "It's these damn gophers. I can't seem to get rid of them." And I said, "You're messing with me, right? This is like your Caddyshack." And he said, "No, I didn't want to kill him, and I didn't want to have an exterminator come out and put poison out, but they're chewing up my yard." And so anyway, true story. So sometimes life imitates art. Sometimes it's the other way around.
That is great. I would still be laughing if that was the situation. That is hilarious, Chris. Thank you for sharing that.
So, Chris, let's talk about one of the biggest events that you had to cover in your career. And let's start with the earthquake game in the World Series in 1989. What was that like, and that experience of covering an earthquake at the World Series?
Yeah, we were the Sports Center crew. I was with Bob Lee and Chris Berman, and we did the pre-show because ABC and Al Michaels had the actual broadcast rights, but we had the satellite trucks at the time that could transmit our show, and we were in the at Candlestick Park, the old Candlestick Park. And we right before the game, A's and Giants, with this. It sounded like a small plane had kind of run into the back of the stadium, and it rocked, and we weren't sure. And then when I saw what looked like on the field, and I'd been through a minor earthquake down in Southern California, but it looked like the field was kind of rolling like waves almost. It wasn't, but that was the visual. And I saw players scatter. I remember Mark McGuire running towards Tony La Russa, and I think Dusty Baker with the Giants, and quickly we recognized, hey, this is serious. This is an earthquake. We didn't know how far reaching it was at that Candlestick Point of San Francisco, but we ran down to the truck and right away got on the air. Bob Lee anchored. Berman, I went and talked as the reporter, as some of the players, what they were experiencing, and then had to try to give the viewers as quickly as we could, because Al Michaels was on for a little bit describing it, and he was familiar, obviously, having been in California with earthquakes. But it was a scary moment. But because that stadium was kind of built into bedrock at Candlestick Park, thankfully the injuries, there were no serious injuries there. But beyond that, as we later found out and stayed through for the next few days, the power was out, lives were lost, and in different parts of the area, the magnitude of that earthquake, the Bay Bridge collapsing. And then it became a story with the commissioner of should baseball even continue a World Series between these two, San Francisco and Oakland, these Bay Area teams. And I thought they handled it as sensitively as they could, and used it to kind of help heal the area and give people something else to hold on to once they took a break and a respite from that. But that's kind of what life is about. You go to cover one thing or prepare and something else happens. And then you just kind of have to react in the moment. And again, our role is to be as informative as we can and as sensitive as we can and as quickly as we can get the news out to people that are watching.
Chris, I remember that game. I was in middle school. I was a 14-year-old boy watching that just in amazement. But with that being said, I saw the 30 for 30 ESPN did. I don't know if you caught that
Yep.
about the earthquake and everything, but was it hard getting back to the hotel? Was it just, we saw all the crazy scenes, and of course, not everywhere is crazy. Of course, the news is going to show the most dramatic, but was it just, did it take you 2.5 hours to get back to the hotel? Did you even try? Was it just down the street? I mean,
Yeah,
what
no,
was
it
that
was.
like after?
Yeah, no, it's a tough question. It was a good question because it was very difficult, and obviously, emergency vehicles took priority. Stoplights were out as the sun set, because it happened a little before 5 local time, 8 Eastern, and so for out west. And our hotel was more downtown, and even when we got there, the power was out. They kind of had a generator, but it didn't power everything. So you had to kind of work the stairs. I think Chris Berman and I were up 12, 20, 18 floors up, depending upon where our meeting, and we had to go by candlelight. And then the other part of it was the plumbing was not necessarily working for anybody in that area, and so that was a little bit difficult. It was hard to even get if you didn't have food nearby, and even the crew trying to supply that. So it became a little survival. But I mean, thankfully we were okay health wise.
Right.
But the area that do to just get through the day and the evening to get ready to do our job the next day, which was to follow up. We almost turned into news reporters because
Right.
we wanted to say, hey, are they going to continue the World Series? They're going to delay it. They're going to play it somewhere else. All these things were on the table, and the commissioner was kind enough to spend time with us. And I remember going to talk to him almost by candlelight to gather that information until they had power up and running in other areas. But the priority areas were getting the medical and the authority, the proper personnel to people who needed it in and around and away, actually further away from the stadium in the Bay. There was also the marina took heavy damage as well.
Hmm.
So, Chris, hold that thought. We are up against yet another break. And when we come back, we are going to dive into more NASCAR and talk about the first time you were on a broadcast in NASCAR. That's on the other side of the break. You're listening to The Stingray Show. We will be right back with Chris Myers. Are you looking for a traditional banking experience with a banker who calls you by name? Then we invite you to get to know our friends at Bryant Bank. Bryant Bank customers enjoy online banking accessible around the clock to give you the freedom and flexibility to bank your way, all backed by the people you know and trust. Get to know your Bryant banker at one of the 4 Tuscaloosa locations today. Bryant Bank, an equal housing lender, and as always, a member of the FDIC. Chris, are you good to? How long do we
Yes,
have with you?
we can go a couple more segments if you
Okay.
need it.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, before we go back, Chris, during that World Series, how long did it take to get back to normal for you guys? Was it, did it never get normal until you got home?
Yeah, until we got home, the city was still recovering. I mean, I was home, I think within a week. I got to get back for a little bit and then come back when they finished. I think it was a week later, once they decided to play the games. But yeah, it took a while. The city took it for a few weeks, and yeah, there was a lot of cleanup and that type of thing. So, but it did. I thought they did a good job in getting to play the game and giving it the right amount of time to help kind of heal people in the
Right.
area.
Wow.
Welcome back inside the Stingray Show. Our guest this evening is Chris Myers, formerly of ESPN and now with NASCAR on Fox. And this weekend is Talladega. And Chris, let's go back to where you started your NASCAR broadcasting, and that was the Daytona 500 in 2001. Give us your thoughts on looking back on what that experience was like covering NASCAR for the very first time for Fox Sports.
Yeah, and I had just left ESPN after a decade there and had done football and baseball, and then Fox got NASCAR, which was a bit of a surprise. And it was the Daytona 500. Speed Weeks then was still 2 weeks, so we were down there covering things. And Darrell Waltrip was in the booth, and we had Larry McReynolds, the crew chief, Alabama's own, who was part of the broadcast as well. I was hosting the pre-race show with Jeff Hammond. We had a group of reporters, but that was obviously. And I had done some NASCAR. Again, grew up in the South. My brothers were big car guys, but at ESPN, I didn't cover it per se. I interviewed guys like Dale Jarrett and Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Gordon on different shows. But this, the 500, a major event. So Michael Waltrip ends up winning, but the story was the Dale Earnhardt. Uh, Hitting the wall, and for us, I guess the hardest part was knowing, at least with the guys that I was working with off the air before, again, I'm on the pre-race and on the broadcast, they could only say so much with Mike Joy. But the reality of that his life was lost, but we couldn't announce that until it was confirmed to the family and NASCAR. And the hard part was guys like Darrell Waltrip had raced against him, and Larry McReynolds had worked with him. I mean, these were not just broadcasters covering somebody; these were friends and family of doing what they love best. And so we had to couch it carefully, and you could tell by the of Ken Schrader running towards and then turning away was the biggest signal that this was an ugly scene. And we really went off the air after Michael Waltrip wins the race. So the high of that for the Waltrip family, and for he was in a DEI car, Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, and then of course the loss not being able to tell much of the viewing audience at that time. We obviously later were able to do that and cover the funeral services and the ceremonies, etc. But that was a very difficult emotional spot to be in as a broadcaster and just as a person after having talked to Earnhardt that week and again being.
Chris, the
Oh,
great Vince Scully.
we lost him. Hey, Chris, you with us?
Yeah, I'm still here. Did I lose you?
Yeah, you popped out for just a second, but
That's all
go
right.
ahead. Go ahead, Heath.
Chris, the great Vince Scully, and I do play by play as well, but the great Vince Scully always talked about he likes to get quiet and let the crowd take over, especially in a big emotional moments. But death is usually not an emotional moment at a sporting event. And that situation right there, did you ever come across anything in your mind preparing for any of this? Like, hey, this might be a possibility that I have to cover a death of a racer or some tragic event.
Yeah, in that case, I had a story at ESPN where, I don't know if you remember, this was back in 1989, first year as a reporter. Hank Gathers was
Yeah.
playing for Loyola Marymount and collapsed on the court, and then later was pronounced dead with a heart attack. A 19-year-old who would have been a first-round pick for the run and gun Paul Westhead team of LMU. And so I covered that and had to kind of talk to the doctor and the head of the school, the athletic director and the chancellor after he was pronounced dead. And so there were I had experience, which is something I wish I hadn't. And I had some tragedy in my own life that I talk about in the book with, losing a son. And so I think you need to be aware of what you're telling the audience, but you're also, you got to just speak from the heart, because I think you can't be cold about it. And if it affects you
Right.
emotionally when you report it, well, that's the reality of it. And that was the challenge with this, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it was frustrating that we couldn't officially tell the audience, but obviously we're still dealing with this. Really, it was a shock, because we'd seen crashes before, but nothing,
Right.
like this did not look like this would take the life of one of the greatest drivers, if not the greatest in the history of the sport. And so there was that. There was the shock of, first of all, the crash, and then the loss of life, and then how do we report it? When can we officially? Because NASCAR and the family needed to be notified, and wanted to hold off. It's the proper way to do it. But I think we all had a feeling of what was going on there. But nothing can prepare you for that. To answer your question, you just and these are things that happen to other people in life in different forms, and you basically do the best you can with what you know at the time, and that's probably the best way to handle it.
Chris, you and I, and I'm not going to make this too morbid of a show, but you and I do have something in common. I was in Centennial Park as a college student. I was in summer school. Yes, I did skip class, but I did tell my professor I was going to skip. That we were heading over to the Olympics. We got tickets to tennis, and but we were down there the night the bomb went off. We were there at the concert
Yep,
just 20, 25 minutes prior, and we were walking back to our car when we heard the big boom. We thought it was a firework,
that's what I thought. Yep, yep.
and we turned around to look in the sky, and we didn't see anything. And then I said, maybe a speaker exploded at that concert, or a transformer or something. We didn't think anything of it. We got in our car shortly after that. We were heading to our room. Our room was in Stone Mountain, Georgia. We had a little bit of a drive,
Right.
but I remember, I mean, it was in the middle of the night, and we kept passing ambulance after fire truck after police car. And I was like, man, these guys are busy tonight. Not did we know until we got to our room what had happened. Tom Brokaw, we turned on the TV, it was just on NBC. Tom Brokaw was talking, and I was like, that that was a bomb. And so I was really confused. But for you guys, figuring out from the explosion to you went on air fighting that emotion as well. Was there, were you scared at all? Were you like, hey, we need to get safe before we go on air? I mean, what was all of that like?
Well, they tried to run. I was taping, believe it or not. I was doing the up close interview. I talked to Barkley earlier in the evening. We actually had Tom Brokaw on the show on up close. We were taping some interviews earlier in the day. It was, remember, since you were there, you remember how hot it was, how warm it was.
Oh
We were
yeah.
at the Chamber of Commerce right on the outside balcony overlooking Centennial Park. And then at night, I would stay and voice over. We couldn't show the actual video because we didn't have the rights at ESPN and Sports Center. But for the late Sports Center, I would voice over the boxing results or whatever results there were that day. It happened to be boxing when I was doing it at whatever one after 1:15 in the morning, somewhere in there. I don't remember the exact time. But anyway, we're live to tape, and I heard the boom, and I thought it was fireworks, so I kept reading and getting through the highlight. And then I saw lights, and I saw people scrambling, and I stopped. We stopped. I told the producer, "Hey, there's something going on down here. We got to check it out." And from their side of working things to ours, the security and police came in and wanted to clear that building. Again, it's late at night, but I stayed with our cameraman and talked our way into staying in that area till we found out what went on. And yeah, I think there was a real fear, when you hear about terrorism and you remember what happened in the history of the Olympics with
Yeah.
terrors, that hey, maybe there are more bombs. And I think that was the general concern. Thankfully, there wasn't more loss of life or injury or threat in that area, but we didn't know that. We didn't know that so we stayed on the air, and ABC News picked us up overnight. I know Tom Brokaw, eventually NBC got down there, but we were the only ones at first in that first hour or so that could stay on. Again, the satellite coverage, like we talked about at the World Series in '89. And I would go talk to security or police. I talked to some medics about some people being injured, and tried to gather as much information. Again, things were a little bit different then without cell phones and that kind of cooperation, the access. But yeah, we pretty much stayed on through the night. I remember doing the final report at 7 or 8 the next morning and just kind of collapsing. But the funny part of it is, if we could find light in all this, is that because it was so hot and I was doing that late sports center, I wore these kind of bad Bermuda shorts because I was sitting behind the desk when I had my jacket and tie and dress shirt on when I was just voicing these highlights. Nobody would see that, so I thought. But then when I went off through the night reporting, I was walking around like this with these shorts and this tie and jacket. Even the police and the medical people are looking at me like, what's going on? This guy 3 in the morning roaming around with a camera, looking like and sometimes the camera shot would show that because I was walking and interviewing people. But it was one of those, again, you're in a situation, you do the best you can and react to it, and didn't have time to change or put makeup on or any of that kind of thing. But it's, again, so many of those. So that's what the book is about. It deserves a wow. There's a lot of happy sports moments, but these other moments that go beyond sports, and they're wow moments that you just never forget. And I can't tell you, like yourself, Heath, how many people have said, "Hey, I remember I was here. I watched the World Series. I was here when I saw the Olympic thing, or I was here when Tom Brady came back against the Patriots in the Super Bowl, that 28-3, or when the Red Sox finally won the World Series." So there's a lot of those happy moments, but there's those other news moments that you wonder, like, wow, how did I end up here? And now what do I have to do to report it?
Chris, I'm going to let you pat yourself on the back. What kind of accolades and respect did you get from your peers when all that was over in Atlanta?
Oh, quite a bit. Thank you. I know quite a bit, and I really appreciate it, and they did too. I think we received some kind of Peabody News Award, or at least ESPN did, for the coverage. But it was something at its time that yes, the people, John Walsh, who was running Sports Center, and a lot of the company, and fellow colleagues, and look, I had help on the other end with producers back in Connecticut. Mark Gross is a name that stands out, who's still there working, that communicated things, so that I could gather information and bring it to the audience. It always is a team effort, but they were very, very appreciative. And I have to admit that my passion for sports, I love interviewing people, but athletes, but I always liked live TV. And you can tape an interview or tape some things, but and I think that's what I like about sports. You're calling an NFL game, or you're doing a highlight show, and you're live, and so things happen. And that's why, if you are live, you're in a situation where some bad things happen, you still have to report on it.
So, Chris, let's go to something exciting. And that, of course, is college football. You have had the opportunity to cover college football, including the BCS games on Fox. If you would give us a couple of the most exciting games that you have ever covered in college football, please.
Well, there was the LSU beating of Ohio State, after that for the championship. That was kind of one that stood out. But the funny one that I talk about, and there were a couple of different years that we had that run. I remember, believe it, I hate to bring this up with Alabama, but I remember when Utah stunned Alabama down at the Sugar Bowl as part of the BCS, that major upset. But the one that got me was, I mentioned earlier, Oklahoma was playing Boise State. Again, there was no college football playoff. Boise State, people questioned, do they deserve to be there, that type of thing. And it was a great overtime game in the Fiesta Bowl, going back and forth. Adrian Peterson is playing, and I'm bouncing around as this field reporter from sideline to sideline. And so the game ends, and it's the upset in overtime, where Boise State wins on a trick play, and Ian Johnson, the running back, scores the conversion to win it. And so I interviewed the quarterback, and they're setting up the stage, and the producer says, "Hey, we need more. We need one more interview before we're ready for the trophy." So I run to get the running back, Ian Johnson, and I said, "Hey, could you go on live with us for a few moments?" And he said, "Yeah, we're going to be live." And I said, yeah. And he said, well, go, I'll go on. I want to propose. And I thought he was going to propose a playoff system or something. So I asked him about the game and the thing, and the producer's wrapping me up, and he doesn't propose his playoff system. And all of a sudden I see the cheerleader, and apparently I had heard during the week he had been dating a cheerleader, and she came running over to him. And so people got mad at me, but I was like, as the producer's telling me to rap, he doesn't know that I heard about the proposal. And so now I'm thinking, oh, is it a wedding proposal? So I said something like, hey, are you going to propose or what? And he goes, oh, yeah, great. This is Christine. And he kneels down in front of her, and I stepped out of the shot, and he proposed, and she said yes, and they got married. I think he left the ring back at the hotel, but for him to be the hero of the game in this monumental upset at the time, and beat Bob Stoops and Adrian Peterson and the Mighty Sooners, and then get the girl, and they're still married to this day, with children. So I've had, from last I heard, but that was one of those moments that again went beyond just the game itself, and that stands out to me.
If you had another moment that you could recall that was fun like that, beyond the game, what comes to mind?
Wow, there's been a few. People talk about being on TV a lot and not being nervous. The first Super Bowl broadcast I did for the Fox network, I was interviewing, they said you could interview Troy Brown of the Patriots. This is when they played the Eagles in the early 2000s, pre-kick. And so I went up to him, and I said, hey, we're going to be interviewing you live. And this was my first Super Bowl too as a broadcaster. And I said, don't be nervous. I know you got a game to play. I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions. It'll be, even though there's 100 million people watching, don't be nervous. And then I'm thinking in my head, boy, I've done Sports Center or interview, but 100 million people watching. I start thinking about this, and then Joe Buck throws it down with Troy Aikman. Hey, let's get out of Chris Myers, and I kind of froze. I was like thinking of all these people watching, and Troy Brown is like tapping me with his shoe, like, "Hey, you got to ask me a question, young man. What's going on here?" And for me, it felt like 5 minutes. It was probably 5 seconds. And the producer's in my ear yelling, "Chris, go! We're live! Go, go, go!" So I just said, "Hey, I hope you're not nervous about the game tonight." It was like one of those lighthearted moments. And of course, the Patriots. That's when Donovan McNabb and Terrell Owens played for the Eagles, and that was one of the early Super Bowl wins for Belichick and Brady. But that was one of the. And after that, I've covered 5 other Super Bowls. I realized, hey, you know what? It's that old thing in our business. You're talking to one person, even though you're talking to an audience. You can include them, but don't think of how big or how small the audience is. That's why as a broadcaster, I always say every night's the Super Bowl. I'm going to treat it that big, no matter what. So I don't get that nervous about it. But that was a lighthearted moment, and I appreciated him, Troy Brown, kind of helping me out and being patient with me.
So, Chris, hold that thought, because we are up against our final break. And when we come back, we are going to dive into Talladega and get your thoughts on Talladega. That's on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Stingray Show. Chris Myers will finish it up with us right after this.
Spring is blooming at Tuscaloosa Farmers Co-op, your one-stop shop for everything you need to grow healthy plants all season long. Come explore our fully stocked garden center featuring trusted names like High Yield and Fertaloom. And don't miss our Bonnie Plant Sale happening now through May. It's the perfect time to stock up on quality vegetables, herbs, and flowers. Whether you're planting a backyard garden or prepping your fields, Tuscaloosa Farmers Co-op has the tools, knowledge, and products to help you grow. Come see us, 4301 McFarland Boulevard, or call us, 205-339-8181.
All right, so the final segment, all I want to do is talk Dega, okay?
Okay.
All right. So Heath, you good?
Yeah, I've got one non-Dega question.
Okay. Do you want to bring us back then?
Yeah, I'll bring us back.
Okay.
Welcome back to the Stingray Show. I'm Heath Hopkins. Along with me is Stephen Ray. And Stingray and I have one very special guest, Chris Myers from Fox, joining us. We're getting ready to talk Talladega. But before we jump into NASCAR and have all the fun with Talladega, Chris, a fun question. Of all the guys that you've worked with, and I know being on air is different than folks in real life. And I used to be an anchor as well. But with that being said, of all the guys you work with, who is the most accurate off air as they are on the air?
Well, that's a good question, and I've worked with a lot of really good people in covering baseball. I can rattle off some names, covering obviously NASCAR, and boy, I had some pretty good basketball analysts as well. I'm going to go to football though, the NFL, which was the first passion of mine that I grew up with, and having interviewed Don Shula at an early age, and respecting coaches. But Troy Aikman comes to mind as the way you phrased that question. He's as detailed off the air as he is on the air, and I got to cover him as a player a little bit when he was a Super Bowl winning quarterback before he became a Hall of Famer, and now he's been in broadcasting more than his playing days. Back when the Cowboys could win Super Bowls, and he was a detailed guy back then. Certainly Tom Brady. I haven't worked with him as much since he's joined Fox, but through the years, Troy Aikman, even in sitting and talking with him, or the notes that he would keep, he still got notes from when he was putting down on his computer from his first year out of football to where he is now on players, coaches. And I think he's also that real. He doesn't change. Some people change for the better on the air, whatever. I'm not judging people, but that would be the guy. I would put him, and there's a few others, but I would put Troy Aikman at the top of that list.
Wow. Okay.
So, Chris, we've danced around it. Now let's talk about Talladega. And you talked in the first segment that you have been going to Talladega for about 20 years now.
Yep.
Please give us a couple of the wildest and craziest wrecks that you have ever seen at Talladega, please.
Wow. Well, I've seen some I've seen some wrecks before the race on Saturday night with some people out partying. I got to tell you that. And I know, like my wife says to me, "Well, how did you know? Where were you out? How could you go out there and see him?" Well, I was observing. I was doing my
Right.
research, my homework. So, but gosh, I would say, and I know this was October. I didn't cover this one, but the October race in, I believe, was 24, had the 28 cars involved in a wreck, in a crash, and so that stands out to me because I always like numbers, and I know there's a number of races we had where people at the end of the race, it was like who wasn't involved in some kind of crash. But I like looking at the other side of that, which I know is part of it, which is not to change my answer or your question in answering, but I think it's 31 or 2 Talladega races have been settled by a last lap pass,
Oh, yeah.
including 3 of the last 6, right? So at least half of the last 6, and that's so it says this to me: you can ride around, you can survive a wreck, you can be in a wreck early, but you can't win if you're not there at the end, and then at the end, you could shoot from 20th or 10th, or depending on the car and who you're working with and the circumstances. So that's what I like about it. And yeah, I know you can somebody can get lucky and get a first time winner type of thing, but I can't specifically. It's been a few years. We've gone some years where it's a ride around and there hasn't been a major wreck, but the idea of still anticipating that big one, right, which I know fans look forward to as well, is what part of the excitement is.
Chris, I won't ask you to give specifics on this answer, but when you guys go to Talladega, are you staying there in town or are you staying out of town?
Initially we stayed in Anniston, that
Okay.
area, when and I remember, I think it was the big place to eat was the Longhorn Steakhouse. I think we had time to hang out, and then some of us stayed towards Birmingham. Sometimes I have there if I'm going to be there a little bit longer, even though that's a longer drive. But some people have to be at the track a lot earlier. Talk about production crew and that type of thing. But this year, I got to say too, I've had so much fun. And I've worked with great people. I asked before about who to work with, but Kevin Harvick and Clint Boyer. I love Jeff Gordon, by the way. He also was, I got to say, a very good, just like he was a driver. And I know there's people that didn't like him as a driver because he was the anti-Earnhardt, but he was a very good guy to work with, very detailed, kind of like the Troy Aikman that I described. But having so much fun this year, we had a Jamie McMurray, but Kevin Harvick is like the professor, the scientist. Clint Boyer is like the partier, who will show up and rock and roll. But certainly knows racing as well and likes to have fun and tease Harvick about not having enough fun on our pre-race show. And then of course they go into the booth to call the race. But we really do have fun when we get to go in there and hang out. And I know things have changed a little bit broadcast wise. I'm not happy about that either, but NASCAR involves some other broadcast partners. We wish them well. I get it. There's money involved. For viewers, I hope they can find the races where they want them, if they're not on Fox or FS1 or NBC. I believe it's Amazon and Turner or where they're going for chunks of the season. But I bring all that up because I think, the natural chemistry of people going to the race and enjoying it, and not just the race on Sunday or what if it's Saturday night or whatever that, but the leading up to it and the practice sessions and that atmosphere is we soak that up, soak that in. I mean, that's part of because these guys have lived it as drivers, they get to enjoy it with a little less pressure now as broadcasters.
So, Chris, let's go back 1 year ago to the spring race of Talladega, a moment that had to be scary for everybody. Now, the name of the driver it has left me, but the guy who broke his pelvis in a wreck at Talladega, and listening to him on the air or on the headset go, "I don't think I'm okay." That had to be scary for everybody involved.
Yeah, and that's more like in the broadcast part. I'm doing the pre and the post, but we're very sensitive. And I think that spring race is the one Tyler Reddick won, correct? Do I, if I'm
Yes.
thinking, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
that's what I want to
Yes.
make sure. Yeah, because we obviously are aware of the cameras, and this goes back if you want to even to the what we talked about with Dale Earnhardt. We have cameras on things. We don't want to show everything if it's too difficult to watch, whether it's an
Yep.
injury or a crash. Yes, that's part of it. But if as long as we know a driver is okay, can walk away, then we can show that. And it's similar with radio transmission. We have somebody monitoring that. Yes, it's a live broadcast, and so we usually kind of listen to those and then re-rack them and play them back in an appropriate moment so people can get a grasp of the situation. And yes, that is having gone through at least my own experience. And again, I wasn't on the air at that moment, but when you hear things like that, that's you do have a flashback to, oh my gosh, is this you don't want somebody being paralyzed or injured to the point where they can't continue to race again or follow their dream and their livelihood. So those moments happen, but we as broadcasters have to be very sensitive to that. And look, I know as a fan too, before I got into being a part of broadcasting racing, the crashes, the fact that guys could push it and crash and walk away and or get mad at somebody for bumping them and knocking them into the wall. I mean that's all part of it. I mean it's like hockey fights. I mean I get it. You just never want it to go to the extreme that you're concerned about somebody's livelihood and safety.
Chris, I got a fun question for you. If you had to take a road trip to Talladega, who would be the three other people you'd want in your car? You can make them all drivers. You can make them broadcast buddies. You can make them execs, whoever.
Well, a couple of people come to mind right away, which is why they're in the book. That deserves a wow, which you can also do the audio book. But Bill Murray and Charles Barkley, who, by the way, I have invited them. I've invited Barkley to come be my guest, and he said, "Why? So you can call me Spot?" But that's Barkley. That's his personality. Only he could get away with saying that, right? He's a character. But so those two come to mind, and those are, and probably because they're not necessarily race fans, but they're sports fans and they're entertaining people. So that's almost the kind of people that I'd want to, if you said a golf foursome as well. But I've had the luxury, and that's why I say it, certainly Jeff Gordon, Kevin Harvick, and Clint Boyer would be three guys that I would, on a road trip. I mean, it would be informative and entertaining, which ultimately, if for a NASCAR guy, I mean, that's, that would be like, hitting a home run for me. So those are a few of the people that come to mind right away.
So, Chris, let's go on ahead and break it down. Give us your prediction of Talladega and why you think that is going to happen.
Yeah, it's difficult to predict based based on the year we've seen. You keep hearing about, you see Blaney, some of the Fords, the Penske guys have speed. You got to remind yourself here. By the way, Penske's won the last three championships. I mean, and the way Logano did it last year. So despite what we've seen, I mean, we're just at the quarter mark of the season after 9 races and the break, and I think this layoff, this week off for Easter, can help some people. I keep thinking of Blaney, and I know Keselowski. He's been had such success there, and he's at a different time with RFK Racing, and a couple of his drivers at RFK have showed some moments. It is a survival race, so I'm going to say, as well as the Toyotas have been and have done so far, and obviously Hendrick Motorsports, I'm leaning towards somebody there, like a Blaney would be, and maybe a Keselowski if I had to, at this point of the week, without seeing a lot more there in person on the day before the race. That's kind of what I'm seeing. That's what I'm leaning towards. But that's the thing, between the crashes and the last lap passes, the lead changes. I think we're going to be in for an exciting race. I hope the weather holds up again. That's always a thought for me too, so that guys don't have to worry about racing to beat the halfway point or the stage necessary.
Chris, did you ever watch Talladega Nights, and did you get to be any help on the set, or anyone ask you a fun question like, "Hey, I want to be in that movie," or "Hey, I'll give you my expert advice"? Or are you just a
Yeah.
big fan of the movie like the rest of us?
No, I'm a big fan, and I have even the Cars movie too. Some people have
Oh
asked
yeah,
in the industry. Yeah, the car, they did such a good job with that, and capturing younger people, and having some personality, and having voices of actual people. So, and Larry the Cable Guy, who I happen to be a big a big fan of. But yeah, I've been in movies before playing. It's funny. I've usually, they've called me to play. I was in Rat Race, as a sportscaster. I was in Volcano briefly as a newscaster. But there was a movie. In fact, Oliver Stone called me to do, on any given Sunday, to do a voiceover over the phone, a football movie. I was in Joanna Man, which was ahead of its time, by the way. A guy,
yeah.
loses his job and becomes like a woman to play to play professional basketball in a women's league. When that movie was a lot of fun to do. But those were but a funny thing, I went for a read one time for a sportscaster, and this was before I had done a lot of work, and they were like, "Ah, you sound good, like you're too much like a news guy. You're not. I don't know if you're really a sportscaster, but thanks anyway for coming in." So I said, "What does Hollywood know, right? They do.
Right.
They just do movies." But anyway, I love, yes, Talladega Nights, very funny, very and I'm glad NASCAR had a good sense of humor about that. I'd like to see some more movies like that, instead of
That
just
makes good ones,
documentary
brother.
series. Yeah, that'd be fun.
So, Chris, we have thoroughly enjoyed this interview with you, and I've got one final question. I wish I could say, yes, I got Chris all by myself, but I actually had an assist. Our good friend, Tim Brando, helped reach out to you and make this interview happen. So I've got to know, Chris, what is your favorite Tim Brando story that you enjoy telling that a lot of people probably don't know?
Well, I go back with him, and he actually helped when I was in local TV working in New Orleans, and he is, Louisiana, Mr. Louisiana Sports, and he
Yeah.
kind of helped connect me so that I could get hired eventually at ESPN. We had some fun days. I don't know if I can tell, and I appreciated him, and he spoke highly of you guys on this show, which is why I said I'd be glad to
Oh wow.
glad to do it with Talladega week coming up. But we had more fun, I guess, in the days of ESPN when he was on the air and I was reporting. I know he was close with John Saunders. Some late nights in Connecticut after Sports Centers when there wasn't anything going on and it was snowing and it was cold and nothing was open, and we would just kind of hang out. Nothing that I could that I could tell publicly
Oh,
about Tim Brando, except that he's a heck of a guy, and he, just like certain people live and die NASCAR, he lives and dies college sports. I mean, that's his wheelhouse, and boy, he's good at it. And I remember that from my roots going back and working in local TV. That boy, that's a guy who knows college sports, and I would lean on him quite a bit when I had some assignments in that area. So I know he's enjoyed being a guest on your show.
Chris, is it safe to say that you and Tim could probably keep each other from running for political office?
Yes, that's true. And you talk about two guys, like a boxing match, but verbally with words. Who's going to outtalk who? And that's, I mean, neither one of us could shut up. And we had we had something at our seminar where it's not broadcast with Fox, NFL, and college people, and I usually do some jokes, and that's we tangled back and forth in that way. Some things that I can't repeat for the for the audience, but that's what everybody said. They said, "Boy, we could." The rest of the guys like Bradshaw, they were like, "Boy, we could listen to you and Brando tease each other all day." It was like one of those roast kind of things. That was a lot of fun. So he's a good sport about that, and I appreciate his sense of humor.
That's great. Well, Chris, I got one last fun question, and it's somewhat like my road trip question I had for you earlier. I make a joke on the show all the time that I would never buy a used car from a college football coach ever. Maybe Mark Richt, but other than that, none of the others, current or former. But if you could pick your neighbors, of all the folks you've worked with, all the folks that you've come across, like Bill Murray, whoever it might be, if you could pick your neighbors, who would you pick? Who are a couple of neighbors you would like to pick?
Well, I can tell you two guys I'd want living on each side of me. One would be Bobby Bowden, and the other would be John Wooden, because those
Wow.
are some of so good at what they did, but they were really, I really felt honored to have known them and spent time with them. I did the Wooden Awards. I did the last interview before he passed away. It was a radio interview. He was at 99 years of age, and asked him about did he fear death, so I talk about in the book. And he was always such a positive guy, even though he was, a stern coach. But they were just good people person, driven, and I think that's, of course, they knew their craft of football, basketball, coaching. But they got through to people, and they were unlike you can have a Bobby Knight and be successful, or Bill Belichick, but I don't know if I no, I don't know if I want those guys as neighbors.
Right.
So they can live down the street, and I'll say hi. But certainly those are the two that come to mind. It's funny. I like that when you ask these questions, I go with my first reaction, because I think if you overthink it, then maybe you don't get the honest reaction that I just expressed.
Yes.
I guess it's safe to say that neither one of us want Troy Aikman to be head of the HOA. He might be
So
keeping too many notes on us, right?
yeah, he would have all the detail. He would say, "Hey, Chris, your fence is a little unhinged here, and your lawn, you haven't cut your lawn properly in the last 2 weeks." So yes, he would be, but he'd probably give me a little heads up on it before he reported me. So
There
I
you
would
go.
appreciate that. Yeah, he's that cool.
So, Chris, look, man, thank you for taking time out of your busy Talladega schedule this week to give us an hour interview. We really appreciate it. Go ahead and let everybody know once again where they can purchase your book that deserves a wow.
Yeah, well, Amazon is the easiest place online. You can go to my website, Chris Myers, Myers, chrismyersports.com. I put NFL notes on there with the draft this week, and also NASCAR notes. I put stats up usually every week for the upcoming race and the last week as well. You can order the book there, and Barnes and Noble, at pretty much any bookstore, but online, Amazon. It's the publisher is available there for you, and the audiobook is also available for people that want to listen.
So, Chris, the floor is all yours for anything that you would like to say to the Tuscaloosa Nation, and, of course, any NASCAR fans that may be coming to Dega this weekend.
Well, I'll say this for first of all, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, whether it's football, basketball. I know I had a great year there, basketball wise. I always enjoyed and always had great respect, from going back to the Bear Bryant days to where you are now through Nick Saban. Alabama football sets the standard. I love Talladega for the reasons we have talked about, but also I just, to have the stage to thank sports fans through the years, because I've really appreciated wherever I've worked and whatever assignment I've been on. And I enjoyed covering different sports because that's how I grew up, as a fan of all of those and different people. how accepting they have been of me. Like even NASCAR, it took a while for some race fans to settle in and say, hey, we like him. He cares about what we're doing. And that's why I always approach any assignment that way, because I know it matters to the people watching and or listening to a broadcast. So I thank you for that. I thank you for the support and for giving me that chance, and including you guys to come on the show. I really enjoyed. Boy, the hour flew by. There was a lot to chat about there, but I appreciate it.
Oh, yes.
Chris, I wish we had 2.5 hours, but brother, thank you so much for this. It has been nothing but an honor.
Yep, we'll do it again. I look forward to it.
And Chris, let me say this before you go. Last year was brutally cold at Talladega. I just looked at the forecast. It is going to be 85 on Sunday.
All right, now we're talking.
Yes,
I'll wear my Bermuda shorts, so hopefully you won't see those.
Yes, sir. Thank you,
Okay.
Chris, and we
All right.
would love to have you join us again sometime soon, my friend.
All right, you got it. No, I enjoyed it. You take care. Look forward to the race. All right, thanks so much.
All right.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye-bye.
Heath, Chris Myers, right there on the Stingray Show, talking everything about his career, and then, of course, Talladega.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading Chris's book. I am going to read it.
Yeah.
So I look forward to that. But Chris, it just comes across as a really fun guy, laid back. But he's a pro's pro, Stephen.
Yes.
He is definitely a pro's pro. He makes everyone's life easier on crew, I bet. I bet you the TV execs and NASCAR execs smile when he walks through, or if, hey, we got an event coming up. Oh, who's going to host it? Who's going to MC it? Who's over it? They say, Chris Myers. I'm sure oh, yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that Chris is nothing but just wonderful to work with. But Stephen, what a great guy.
Yes. And dude, Talladega, man, can you imagine what it's going to be like this week and this weekend?
I know when I was in college, a lot of students would go over to Talladega, and they would just talk about the party. And it was funny because folks would go off to Mardi Gras, and then they would go off to Talladega. And I was like, hey, which one was better? 10 times out of 10, they would always say Talladega. Like, what? Like, seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Talladega is a whole lot more fun. And so it always blows my mind. I have never been. I've always wanted to go. I got invited a couple of times. I didn't get a chance to go. But man, oh man, I know it's going to be fun for all of those who are there.
So I will tell you, I went last year to Talladega. I went for the Sunday race only. It was awesome. It was, if you just go to the race and go home, it was very family friendly and awesome. All of the shenanigans takes place where the RVs are and the campgrounds.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people hope that a lot of things don't make social media that happen out there on the campgrounds. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. But if you do go to the race and go home, it is very family friendly and it is a lot of fun.
Always wanted to do it, never had the chance. Well, I've had the chance, was never able to make it happen.
So guys, that is going to wrap up yet another edition of the Stingray Show. Hope you have thoroughly enjoyed this interview previewing one of Alabama's biggest events of the year, the Talladega NASCAR race. There is one in the spring, and then there will be one back in the fall around the time of October and November. So we will be back with you tomorrow evening after Alabama baseball, because Alabama baseball takes on Missouri Thursday, Friday, and Saturday this week. And then when we come back next Monday, we are going to have John Brady, the former LSU legendary basketball coach, join us for a full interview about his career at LSU. So we will catch you at our normal time of 7 p.m. on Monday evening with John Brady, and sorry about that little slip up there. And we will also see you tomorrow evening after Alabama baseball and on Friday after Alabama baseball with more interview shows. We will see you guys on down the line. And Heath, you got to go to Talladega, man. You got to knock it off your bucket list.
Brother, you don't have to twist my arm. I'm really wanting to go. I just can't make it happen right now.
Yep.
But it's going to happen.
Yes. All right, so guys, here in Tuscaloosa, enjoy your Talladega weekend. Catch you guys next time on the Stingray Show.
I don't want to hear any references to cold trickle, but I'm all about shake and bake, baby.
Yes.